The autumn rain fell steadily over Pinewood, Oregon, a small town nestled between forests of Douglas fir and rolling hills that turned gold each October. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where Friday night football games drew the whole community, and where secrets had a way of hiding in plain sight behind white picket fences and friendly waves. Marcus Thompson sat hunched in the corner of the boys' locker room at Pinewood Middle School, his thin frame pressed against cold metal lockers as he tried to make himself invisible. At 10 years old, he was small for his age, all sharp angles and hollow cheeks, with brown hair that hung too long over eyes that had learned to look at the ground. His worn sneakers, 2 sizes too big and held together with duct tape, squeaked against the damp tile floor. Well, well, well. Look who's trying to hide again. Marcus's stomach clenched. He recognized that voice, Brandon Hutchins, 13 years old and built like the linebacker he was, with a cruel smile that never reached his cold blue eyes. Behind Brandon stood his usual crew, Tyler Morrison and Chad Reynolds, both 7th graders who had made Marcus's life a living hell for the past 8 months. "Please," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "I didn't do anything." "You exist," Brandon said, stepping closer. "That's enough." What happened next was a blur of pain. Fists connected with Marcus's ribs, once, twice, 3 times. His head snapped back as someone shoved him hard against the lockers, the metal edge catching him just above his eye. He tasted blood, felt it warm and metallic on his tongue as it dripped from his split lip. Tyler's knee found his stomach, and Marcus doubled over, gasping for air that wouldn't come. "My dad says your dad's a drunk," Chad laughed, grabbing Marcus's hair and yanking his head up. "Says your mom died because she couldn't stand being around you anymore. Drove right off that bridge just to get away from you." Something inside Marcus shattered at those words, something that had already been cracked and fragile. Tears burned his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He'd learned that crying only made it worse. The bell rang, its shrill sound echoing through the locker room. Brandon delivered one final shove that sent Marcus sprawling onto the wet floor before the 3 boys disappeared, their laughter fading down the hallway. Marcus lay there for a long moment, every breath sending sharp pains through his ribs. His left eye was already swelling shut, and he could feel bruises forming across his torso like dark continents on a map of suffering. Slowly, painfully, he pulled himself to his feet. The mirror above the sinks showed him what he already knew: a battered child with blood on his chin and fear in his eyes. The same face he saw every day, just with fresh damage added to the collection. Marcus knew what came next. He'd go to Mrs. Henderson, the school counselor, just like he'd done 6 times before. She'd give him that pitying look, hand him an ice pack, and tell him she'd look into it. But nothing ever changed. The bruises healed, the pattern repeated, and the adults who were supposed to protect him just looked the other way. Not this time. Instead of heading to the counselor's office, Marcus grabbed his threadbare backpack from the floor, the same one his mother had bought him 3 years ago, before the accident, when she was still alive and the world still made sense, and walked straight out of the school. No one stopped him. The hallway monitors were changing shifts, the teachers were in their classrooms, and Marcus Thompson was just another invisible kid slipping through the cracks. The October air was cold against his battered face as he stumbled down Maple Street, past the rows of neat houses with their jack-o'-lanterns already decorating front porches for Halloween next week. A holiday that meant nothing to Marcus anymore. His father, Derek Thompson, would spend it like he spent every evening, drunk on the couch, staring at the television with empty bottles scattered around him like fallen soldiers. Marcus's vision blurred with tears he could no longer hold back. His ribs screamed with each step and his eye had swollen completely shut. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't go home. Not yet. Not to that dark, dirty house that smelled like stale beer and failure. Not to the man who looked at him with such hatred, who blamed him for the accident that took Rachel Thompson's life 2 years ago. "It should have been you," Derek had told him just last night, whiskey slurring his words. "She was driving to pick you up from that stupid school event. If you hadn't begged her to come, she'd still be here. You killed her, Marcus. You killed your own mother." Marcus had believed those words. He'd carried that guilt like stones in his pockets, weighing him down, drowning him slowly. Maybe Brandon was right. Maybe his mother had driven off that bridge on purpose. Maybe everyone would be better off if he just disappeared. He found himself behind Bernie's diner on 4th Street, collapsing behind the dumpsters where the smell of old grease and rotting food filled the air. His body shook, from cold, from pain, from the overwhelming weight of a life he didn't know how to live anymore. Blood dripped onto his shirt, adding to the stains already there. His stomach cramped with hunger. Derek hadn't bought groceries in 3 weeks, and the school lunch he'd missed today was the only real meal he usually got. That's when he heard it, the deep rumbling sound of a motorcycle engine. Marcus pressed himself further into the shadows, trying to disappear. But the engine cut off, and heavy boots crunched across the gravel behind the diner. "Hey there!" The voice was deep but gentle, not threatening. Marcus looked up through his one good eye and saw a man standing a few feet away. He was tall and broad-shouldered, probably in his early 40s, with a thick beard streaked with grey and dark eyes that seemed to take in everything. He wore a black leather jacket with patches sewn across it, faded jeans, and scuffed motorcycle boots. Tattoos covered his forearms, intricate designs Marcus couldn't quite make out. But it was the man's face that struck Marcus most. Despite the intimidating appearance, the beard, the leather, the visible scar that ran from his right ear to his jaw, his eyes were kind. Sad, maybe, but kind. "I'm Jake," the man said, staying where he was, not moving closer. "Jake Morrison. I was just grabbing lunch when I saw you duck back here. You okay, kid?" Marcus wanted to say yes, to lie like he always did, to protect the awful truth of his life, because that's what he'd been taught to do. But something about this stranger with the kind eyes broke through his defenses. He shook his head, and fresh tears spilled down his cheeks, stinging as they ran across his cuts and bruises. "No," Marcus whispered. "I'm not okay." Jake's jaw tightened as he took in the boy's injuries, the swollen eye, the split lip, the way he held his ribs like they might break if he breathed too deeply. Anger flashed across his face, but not at Marcus. Never at Marcus. "Who did this to you?" "It doesn't matter," Marcus said, and he meant it, because whether it was Brandon and his friends at school, or his father's fists at home, or the world itself that seemed determined to crush him, it all hurt the same. "It matters," Jake said firmly. He slowly lowered himself to sit on an overturned crate, still maintaining distance, not crowding the terrified child. "Listen, Marcus. It is Marcus, right? I saw your name on your backpack. I know you don't know me from Adam, and I look like someone your mom probably warned you about. But I promise you, I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help." Marcus studied him through his one functioning eye. His mother had warned him about strangers. But his mother was dead. His father had become a monster. His school had failed him, and every adult who was supposed to protect him had looked the other way. What did he have left to lose? "I'm hungry," Marcus admitted, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I'm really hungry, and I hurt everywhere, and I don't want to go home, and I don't want to go back to school, and I just want it to stop." Jake's expression softened with something Marcus hadn't seen in 2 years, genuine compassion. "Okay," he said quietly. "First things first. Let me buy you a meal, a real meal, whatever you want. Then we can figure out the rest. Does that sound all right?" Marcus nodded slowly. Jake stood and gestured toward the diner's back door. "Come on, let's get you inside where it's warm, and we should probably get some ice on that eye." They walked around to the front entrance of Bernie's Diner, a classic small-town establishment with red vinyl booths and a long counter with swivel stools. The lunch rush had ended, leaving the place mostly empty except for a few regulars nursing coffee and pie. Jake guided Marcus to a corner booth, the kind that offered privacy and a view of the door, habits from another life, Marcus would later learn. Bernie himself, a portly man in his 60s with a white apron and a friendly smile, came over with menus and 2 glasses of water. His smile faltered when he saw Marcus's face. "Good Lord, Jake. That boy needs a hospital." "He needs food first," Jake said, his tone brooking no argument. "And some ice if you got it." Bernie nodded and disappeared, returning moments later with a dish towel wrapped around ice cubes. Jake gently took it and showed Marcus how to hold it against his swollen eye. The cold stung at first, then brought blessed numbness. "Order whatever you want," Jake told him, pushing the menu across the scarred table. "Seriously, anything." Marcus's hands shook as he opened the menu. His father barely fed him anymore, and when he did, it was usually stale cereal or whatever Marcus could scrounge from the nearly empty cupboards. The idea of choosing his own meal, of having enough food to actually feel full, seemed almost impossible. "The meatloaf is really good," Jake offered. "Comes with mashed potatoes and green beans. Or if you're more of a burger kid, Bernie makes the best in 3 counties." Can I have both?" Marcus asked, then immediately regretted it. "Sorry, that's too much. Just the burger is fine." "Both it is," Jake said firmly, waving Bernie over. "We'll take the meatloaf special and a cheeseburger with fries, and a chocolate milkshake. Actually, make that 2 milkshakes." As Bernie headed back to the kitchen, Jake leaned forward slightly, his forearms resting on the table. "Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you safe at home?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus wanted to lie, wanted to protect the fiction that everything was fine, that he had a normal life like other kids. But he was so tired of lying, so tired of pretending, so tired of being alone. "No," he whispered, staring at the ice melting in his water glass. "My dad. He blames me for my mum's death. She died in a car accident 2 years ago. She was coming to pick me up from a school event, and there was a storm, and she went off a bridge. My dad says it's my fault. He drinks a lot now. He doesn't really want me around." Jake's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching in his cheek. "Does he hit you?" Marcus hesitated. "Sometimes, when he's really drunk. But mostly he just forgets I exist. He doesn't buy food or pay attention when I'm home. I try to stay out of his way." "And the bruises on your face? Those from your dad?" "No," Marcus admitted. "Those are from school. There are these older kids who... they hurt me. A lot. I've told the counselor, but nothing ever changes." Jake closed his eyes for a moment, and Marcus saw his hands curl into fists on the table before deliberately unclenching them. When he opened his eyes again, there was a fierce determination there that Marcus didn't understand. "Marcus, I want you to know something. What's happening to you, at home, at school, none of it is okay. None of it is your fault. Your mother's death wasn't your fault. The fact that your father can't cope with his grief doesn't give him the right to neglect you. And those kids at school? They're criminals, plain and simple. Assault is assault, whether you're 10 or 40. No one had ever said these words to Marcus before. No one had ever told him that he mattered, that what was happening to him was wrong, that he deserved better. The relief that flooded through him was so intense, it hurt worse than his ribs. Bernie arrived with their food, setting heaping plates in front of them. The smell made Marcus's mouth water and his empty stomach clench with need. He picked up his fork with trembling hands and took his first bite of meatloaf. It was warm and savory and perfect, and before he knew it, he was eating like he'd never eaten before, fast, desperate, afraid it might disappear. "Slow down, buddy," Jake said gently. "No one's going to take it away, I promise." Marcus forced himself to eat more slowly, though it went against every instinct. Jake ate too, but Marcus noticed he kept glancing at him with that same mixture of sadness and determination. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the warm food filling the hollow places inside Marcus with something more than just calories. With the first taste of care he'd experienced in 2 years. When Marcus had finished both plates, every single bite, and drained his chocolate milkshake, Jake pulled a napkin from the dispenser and slid it across to him. "Better?" "Yeah," Marcus said, and it was true. His stomach was full, his eye had stopped throbbing quite so badly, and for the first time in months, he didn't feel completely alone. "Thank you, but I don't have any money to pay you back." "Don't worry about it," Jake said. "Consider it a gift from a friend." "We're friends?" Marcus asked, the concept foreign to him. He hadn't had a friend in so long. "If you want to be," Jake offered with a small smile. "I'm pretty good at being a friend. And I'm even better at protecting people who need protecting." Marcus looked at this stranger, who had shown him more kindness in an hour than most people had in years. He thought about going back to school tomorrow, facing Brandon and his crew again. He thought about going home tonight to his father's indifference and cruelty. He thought about his mother, who he missed so much it felt like a physical wound that never healed. And then Marcus asked the question that would change both of their lives forever. "Jake," he said, his voice small and hopeful and breaking, "you can be my dad?" The words hung between them. Jake's eyes widened, then filled with tears he blinked away rapidly. His throat worked as he swallowed hard, clearly struggling with emotion. "Marcus, I know you don't know me," Marcus rushed on, afraid if he stopped talking, Jake would say no. "And I know I'm just some random kid you found behind a dumpster, but you're nice to me. You fed me, and you listened to me, and you looked at me like I matter. My real dad doesn't do any of that. He hasn't for 2 years, and I just need someone who cares, if I live or die. Please." A single tear rolled down Jake's weathered cheek. He reached across the table and gently placed his large, calloused hand over Marcus's small, trembling one. "Kid," Jake said, his voice rough with emotion, "you just met me. You don't know anything about me. I could be dangerous. I could be bad news." "Are you?" Marcus asked. "No," Jake said firmly. "No, I'm not. But that's not the point. The point is, I'm alone and scared and I don't want to be anymore." Marcus interrupted, tears streaming down his face now. "The point is, I asked for help from everyone who was supposed to help me. And nobody did. Nobody except you. So maybe you're not my real dad. Maybe you can't actually be my dad. But could you just pretend, just for a little while, so I can remember what it feels like to have someone who cares?" Jake Morrison had been a soldier in Iraq. He'd seen combat, lost friends, made impossible decisions under fire, and carried the weight of memories that would haunt him forever. He'd thought he knew what heartbreak felt like. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for this moment. For this broken child, begging for the most basic human need, to be loved. "Marcus," Jake said softly, squeezing his hand, "I can't make you any promises right now. What you're asking for, it's complicated. There are laws and systems and procedures. But I can promise you this, I will not abandon you. Starting right now, you have someone who cares. You have someone who will fight for you. You have someone who will make damn sure you're safe and fed and protected. Do you understand me?" Marcus nodded, fresh tears falling. "Does that mean you'll be my friend?" "That means I'll be whatever you need me to be," Jake said. "And the first thing we're going to do is make sure you're okay medically. Then we're going to talk about your situation at home and at school. And then," he paused, a fierce protectiveness settling over his features, "then we're going to make sure this never happens to you again." "How?" Marcus asked. Because in his experience, adults made promises they never kept. Jake leaned back in the booth, a plan already forming in his mind. "I have some friends," he said. "Brothers, really. Men who understand what it means to protect people who can't protect themselves. Men who believe that children deserve to be safe, no matter what. And I think it's time Pinewood Middle School got a wake-up call." What kind of wake-up call? Jake's smile was equal parts warmth and steel. The kind that makes sure every single person in that school understands that you are not alone anymore. The kind that makes it very clear what happens when a community fails its children. The kind that changes things. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus felt something stir in his chest that he'd almost forgotten existed: hope. Jake Morrison's apartment was small, but immaculately clean. A stark one-bedroom above the hardware store on Main Street, with sparse furniture and walls decorated only with a few framed photographs. As he sat on his couch that evening, after taking Marcus to the urgent care clinic and then helping him navigate a difficult conversation with a social worker, Jake found himself staring at one photograph in particular. It showed a younger version of himself in Marine Corps dress blues, arm around a beautiful woman with auburn hair and green eyes, Amanda Morrison, his wife. And between them, grinning with missing front teeth, was a boy about Marcus's age, Connor Morrison, his son. Past tense, because Connor had been dead for 5 years. Jake picked up the frame with hands that still shook sometimes when he thought about that day. April 14th, 2020. A sunny Saturday afternoon in Seattle. Connor had been riding his bicycle on their quiet suburban street, wearing his helmet, following all the rules, doing everything right. Jake had been watching from the front porch, rebuilding the porch swing, looking up every few minutes to wave at his son. The driver who hit Connor had been texting, swerved right up onto the sidewalk doing 45 miles per hour in a residential zone. Connor never had a chance. Jake had run to him, had held his broken body as Amanda screamed and neighbors called 911, but his son was already gone. Those bright blue eyes that looked so much like his mother's were open but seeing nothing, and Jake's entire world had ended in the time it took his heart to understand what his brain already knew. The driver got 3 years for vehicular manslaughter, served 18 months, was probably out there right now, living his life while Connor would be 15 years old and never coming home. The marriage hadn't survived the grief. Jake and Amanda had tried, God, how they'd tried. But every time they looked at each other, they saw Connor. Every conversation became about what they'd lost. Every milestone he should have reached became a fresh wound. They'd divorced 2 years after the funeral, both of them drowning in separate oceans of pain, unable to save each other. Jake had spiraled. He'd left his job as a mechanical engineer, started drinking, stopped caring about anything. He'd been weeks away from eating his service pistol when he met Gerald Bear Patterson at a VA support group. Bear was a Vietnam veteran, 68 years old, built like the nickname suggested, with a white beard and hands scarred from decades of mechanic work. Bear had taken one look at Jake and said, "You look like a man who needs a purpose." That purpose became the Road Guardians, a motorcycle club Bear had founded with other veterans specifically to protect vulnerable children. They escorted kids who were being bullied to school. They stood watch at custody exchanges for domestic violence victims. They advocated for children lost in the foster system. They were heavily tattooed men on loud motorcycles who scared most people on sight, but who had collectively saved dozens of kids from situations that would have destroyed them. Jake had found his reason to keep breathing in that work. Each child they helped was a way to honor Connor's memory, a way to make sure that his son's death meant something, a way to ensure that no child suffered alone if he could prevent it. And now, there was Marcus Thompson. Jake had taken the boy to Summit Urgent Care on the edge of town, where Dr. Patricia Winters had examined him with growing concern. 2 cracked ribs, severe bruising across his torso and face, malnutrition, signs of chronic neglect. She documented everything with photographs and careful notes, her professional demeanor barely concealing her anger. "This is a mandatory reporting situation," she told Jake quietly while Marcus was getting dressed. "I have to file a report with Child Protective Services." "Good," Jake had said. "That's exactly what needs to happen." The social worker, Jennifer Valdez, had arrived within an hour. She was in her mid-30s, with kind eyes but a weary expression that came from seeing too many cases like Marcus's and not enough resources to help them all. She'd interviewed Marcus gently but thoroughly, documenting his account of the abuse at school and the neglect at home. "I'll need to do a home visit," she'd told them, "talk to his father, assess the living situation." "And then what?" Jake had asked, fighting to keep his voice level. "How long before Marcus is actually safe?" Jennifer had given him a look that said she understood his frustration but was bound by bureaucracy. "The system moves as fast as it can, Mr. Morrison. I'll prioritize this case given the visible injuries and malnutrition, but there are procedures we have to follow." "How long?" Jake pressed. "Could be days, could be weeks. It depends on what I find during the home visit, whether the father is cooperative, whether there's an immediate danger assessment." "He's a 10-year-old kid who's being beaten at school and starved at home," Jake had said, his voice tight. "How is that not an immediate danger?" "I'm on your side," Jennifer had assured him. "I promise, but I can't just remove a child without proper documentation and due process. What I can do is make sure Marcus is monitored closely, check-ins at school, surprise home visits, and if the situation deteriorates, I can move for emergency removal." It wasn't enough. Jake knew it wasn't enough. But it was all the system could offer, hamstrung by laws designed to protect parental rights even when parents didn't deserve them. He'd taken Marcus back to Bernie's diner for dinner. Another full meal the boy had eaten like he might never see food again. Then he'd driven him home in his pickup truck, the boy's bicycle that Jake had retrieved from the school loaded in the back. They'd sat outside the house on Birch Street, a rundown two-story with peeling paint, an overgrown yard, and broken gutters hanging at odd angles. "I don't want to go in there," Marcus had whispered. "I know," Jake had said. "But right now, legally, this is where you have to be. The social worker is going to visit your dad tomorrow. If things go the way I think they will, this won't be your home much longer. Can you be brave for just a little bit more?" Marcus had nodded, but his hands were shaking. "Will you come inside with me, just to make sure he's okay?" Jake had walked Marcus to the door. Derek Thompson had answered, a man in his late 30s who looked 50, with bloodshot eyes, unkempt hair, and the bloated face of a serious alcoholic. He'd barely looked at Marcus, his gaze focusing on Jake with vague confusion. "Who are you?" Derek had slurred. "A friend," Jake had said evenly. "I'm making sure Marcus gets home safe." "Kid can take care of himself," Derek had muttered, already turning away. "Don't need strangers bringing him around." Jake had crouched to Marcus's eye level. "Remember what I said, you're not alone. You have my number. If anything happens, anything, you call me. Doesn't matter what time it is, understand?" Marcus had nodded, clutching the piece of paper with Jake's phone number like a lifeline. Then he disappeared into that dark, neglected house, and Jake had forced himself to walk away, even though every instinct screamed at him to take the boy somewhere safe. Now, sitting in his apartment, Jake pulled out his phone and opened the group chat for the Road Guardians. There were 32 active members in their Pinewood chapter, veterans from every branch of service, ranging from their early 30s to Bear's 68 years. Men who had seen the worst of humanity and decided to fight against it. Jake typed out a message. "Brothers, emergency situation. Need everyone at the clubhouse tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. This is important. We have a child who needs protecting and the system is moving too slow. Time to send a message." The responses came quickly. "Bear, I'll be there. What do you need?" Marcus Reynolds, No relation to the school bully, thankfully. Count me in. David Chen, wouldn't miss it. Thomas Tiny Williams, 6'5" and built like a tank. Ready when you are, brother. One by one, all 32 members confirmed, because that's what the Road Guardians did. When one of their brothers called, they answered. When a child needed protecting, they showed up. No questions, no hesitation, no excuses. Jake spent the rest of the evening researching Pinewood Middle School's policies on bullying, documenting everything Marcus had told him, and reaching out to Dr. Winters for copies of the medical documentation. He also looked up the school's principal, Richard Anderson, 53 years old, 20 years in education, with a reputation for running a tight ship, but no particular awards or recognition for anti-bullying initiatives. By midnight, Jake had a plan. It wouldn't be subtle. It probably wouldn't make him popular. But it would work, because intimidation was sometimes the only language institutions understood. When children were being hurt and adults were looking away, sometimes it took a different kind of adult to force them to look directly at the problem. The next morning, Jake rode his Harley-Davidson to the old garage on the outskirts of town that served as the Road Guardians' unofficial clubhouse. It was a large metal building with motorcycle repair bays, a lounge area with worn couches and a pool table, and walls covered in patches, flags, and photographs of members past and present. By 9 a.m., 32 motorcycles were parked outside, and 32 men were gathered inside, drinking coffee and waiting for Jake to explain why he'd called this emergency meeting. They were an intimidating group, Jake had to admit. All wearing their leather vests with the Road Guardians patch on the back, a shield with angel wings, and the motto, "Protect the Innocent," embroidered beneath it. Tattoos, beards, scars, and the bearing of men who'd been tested by combat and come out harder but not broken. Jake stood at the front of the room and told them about Marcus Thompson. He didn't sugarcoat it. He described the bruises, the cracked ribs, the malnutrition, the neglect at home, the bullying at school, and the institutions that had failed this child repeatedly. He showed them the photographs Dr. Winters had taken of Marcus's injuries. He showed them the boy's desperate question, "You can be my dad?" By the time he finished, the room was silent except for the sound of grown men trying to control their rage. Bear spoke first, his gravelly voice filled with quiet fury. "What do you need from us, brother?" "I need us to send a message," Jake said. "The school has ignored this boy's pleas for help. The administrators have allowed violent bullies to assault a child under their care. They've created an environment where Marcus believed no one would protect him. I think it's time we show them they were wrong." "What kind of message?" asked Marcus Reynolds, a former Army Ranger with burn scars covering the left side of his neck. Jake smiled, though there was no humor in it. "The kind that makes it very clear that Marcus Thompson is under our protection now. The kind that makes those administrators understand that their negligence has consequences. The kind that those bullies will see in their nightmares." "You want us to roll up to the school," David Chen said slowly, understanding dawning. David was a former Navy corpsman, now a nurse at the local hospital, one of the youngest members at 32. "All of us, full colors, make it clear the boy's not alone." "Exactly," Jake confirmed. "Tomorrow morning, we escort Marcus to school, all 32 of us. We walk him to his classes. We make sure every student, every teacher, every administrator, and especially those 3 bullies understand that touching him again means answering to us. And we stay within the law," Bear added, because he always made sure their actions were carefully considered. "No threats, no violence, just presence. Let the school see what it looks like when a community actually protects its children." "The optics will be incredible," said James Rodriguez, a former Marine Corps intelligence officer who now taught high school in the next town over. 32 veterans on motorcycles escorting one abused child. The school won't know what hit them, and if they're smart, they'll realize this is their wake-up call to actually do their jobs. And if they're not smart? Asked Tiny Williams. Then we keep showing up, Jake said simply. Every single day if we have to. We make it impossible for them to ignore. We turn Marcus Thompson into the most visible student in that entire school. They can't let him get hurt if the whole town is watching. The vote was unanimous. 32 hands went up, 32 voices said yes, and 32 veterans committed themselves to protecting one 10-year-old boy they'd never met, but who represented every child they'd ever failed to save. Jake called Marcus that evening. The boy answered on the first ring, his voice small and cautious. Jake? Hey buddy, how you doing? Okay, I guess. The social worker lady came by today. She talked to my dad for a long time. He was mad after she left, but he didn't hit me or anything. He just went to his room with a bottle. Jake's jaw clenched. That's good. That you're okay, I mean. Listen, Marcus, I want to tell you about tomorrow. Something's going to happen that might seem a little scary at first, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? What's going to happen? I'm going to pick you up in the morning and take you to school, Jake said. But I won't be alone. I'm bringing my friends, my brothers. There are 32 of us, and we're all going to make sure you get to school safely. We're going to walk you to your classes. We're going to show everyone at that school that you matter. Silence on the other end. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, all 32? Really? Really? We ride motorcycles, Marcus. We look pretty intimidating, but every single one of us is a veteran who believes children deserve to be protected. And we've all decided that you're worth protecting. So tomorrow morning, I need you to be brave. Hold your head up and know that you're not facing those bullies alone anymore. You're facing them with 32 brothers at your back. Think you can do that? Marcus's voice was stronger when he answered. Yeah, I can do that. Good man. I'll see you at 7:30 a.m. Be ready. That night, Jake barely slept. He kept thinking about Connor, about all the what-ifs and should-haves that haunted every parent who'd lost a child. He couldn't save his son. He couldn't turn back time, but maybe, just maybe, he could save Marcus. Maybe he could be the father this boy desperately needed. Maybe he could transform his grief into something that honored Connor's memory. And maybe, along the way, Marcus Thompson could heal the broken places in Jake Morrison's heart. The morning of October 23rd dawned cold and clear over Pinewood, Oregon. Frost sparkled on the grass, and the sun rose over the hills in shades of orange and gold, casting long shadows across the quiet streets of the small town that had no idea what was about to happen. Jake Morrison pulled up to the house on Birch Street at exactly 7:30 a.m., his Harley-Davidson rumbling like thunder in the peaceful neighborhood. He was wearing his full Road Guardians colors, the leather vest with all its patches, each one telling a story of service, brotherhood, and commitment. Behind him, stretched out for 2 blocks, were 31 more motorcycles, 31 more veterans, 31 more men who decided that today was the day Pinewood Middle School learned what accountability looked like. Marcus Thompson appeared on the front porch with his backpack, his eyes widening as he took in the sight before him. 32 motorcycles, 32 men in leather and denim, standing beside their bikes like an army assembled for battle. Except this army fought for children instead of countries. Jake dismounted and walked up to the porch. Marcus looked different this morning, still bruised, still too thin, but standing taller. There was something in his eyes that hadn't been there 2 days ago when Jake had found him behind the dumpster. Hope, maybe. Or maybe just the knowledge that he wasn't alone anymore. You ready? Jake asked gently. Marcus nodded, then looked past Jake to the assembled men. That's really all for me. Every single one of us, Jake confirmed. Come on, let me introduce you to your new family. They walked down to the street, and Jake led Marcus to each motorcycle, introducing him to each member of the Road Guardians. Bear Patterson, the founder, who looked at Marcus with the same fierce protectiveness he'd shown dozens of kids before. David Chen, who told Marcus about his own experiences with bullying as an Asian American kid in a predominantly white town. Thomas Tiny Williams, whose massive size contrasted with his gentle demeanor. Marcus Reynolds, James Rodriguez, Kevin Harris, Anthony Carter, one after another, 32 men who shook Marcus's small hand and made him the same promise. "We've got your back, kid." By the time they finished introductions, Marcus's eyes were wet with tears, but he was smiling. Actually smiling, something Jake realized he'd never seen the boy do before. "You ride with me?" Jake told him, gesturing to his Harley. "Ever been on a motorcycle?" Marcus shook his head. Jake pulled out a spare helmet, a youth size he'd bought yesterday specifically for this purpose. He helped Marcus put it on, adjusting the straps carefully. "Hold on tight to me, okay? Lean when I lean. And Marcus, enjoy this. This is about you being safe, but it's also about you knowing you're valued, that you're worth all this effort. Understand?" "I understand," Marcus said, and there was wonder in his voice. Jake swung onto his bike and helped Marcus settle behind him. The boy's arms wrapped around Jake's waist, holding on tight. Jake looked back at his brothers, all mounted on their own motorcycles, engines rumbling like a contained storm. "Roll out!" Jake called. The sound of 32 Harley-Davidsons roaring to life simultaneously was like thunder rolling across Pinewood. Neighbors came out onto their porches to see what was happening. Cars pulled over to let the procession pass. People on their way to work stopped and stared as 32 motorcycles rumbled through town in perfect formation, with one small boy riding behind the lead biker. Jake felt Marcus's grip tighten as they rode, and he made sure to keep their speed moderate, the ride smooth and steady. This wasn't about speed, it was about presence, about power used in service of protection, about showing a child that he mattered enough for 32 strangers to rearrange their entire day. Pinewood Middle School was a sprawling brick building surrounded by playing fields and parking lots, designed to serve about 400 students in grades 6 through 8. As Jake led the procession into the circular drive in front of the main entrance, he saw the first signs of awareness. Students getting off buses and staring, teachers on morning duty freezing in place, and faces appearing in windows as the rumble of the motorcycles announced their arrival. Jake parked directly in front of the main entrance, in a space technically reserved for buses. He didn't care. The other 31 motorcycles arranged themselves in a perfect semicircle behind him, creating a wall of chrome and leather and patches that said "Veteran" and "Road Guardians" and "Protect the Innocent." The engines cut off simultaneously, leaving a ringing silence that felt louder than the noise had been. Jake helped Marcus dismount and removed his helmet. The boy's face was flushed with excitement and something that looked like pride. Around them, the entire school had stopped to watch. Principal Richard Anderson came bursting out of the main entrance, his face red with anger and confusion. He was a tall man, with thinning hair and wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a button-down shirt and tie that suggested authority he was about to discover he didn't actually possess. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, striding toward Jake. "You can't just park here. This is school property. I'm calling the police." Jake stood his ground, one hand on Marcus's shoulder. Behind him, 31 veterans dismounted and stood in formation, arms crossed, facing the principal. The message was clear. "Get through us if you want to get to this boy." "Call them," Jake said calmly. "We're not breaking any laws. We're escorting a student to school. A student who has been repeatedly assaulted on your watch and whose pleas for help you've ignored. We figured he could use some protection." Principal Anderson's eyes flicked to Marcus and something like recognition dawned. "Marcus Thompson, what is this about?" "It's about a child being beaten bloody in your locker rooms while your staff looks the other way," Bear Patterson said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience dealing with incompetent authority figures. "It's about a boy with cracked ribs, and a documented history of asking your counselor for help, only to be told you'd look into it. How's that investigation going, Principal Anderson? Anderson's face paled. We have protocols for dealing with bullying. Protocols that don't work, David Chen interrupted. I'm a nurse. I saw the medical documentation of Marcus's injuries. 2 cracked ribs, severe bruising, multiple contusions to his face. All sustained during school hours under your supervision. If this were any other setting, you'd be liable for criminal negligence. A crowd had gathered. Students pouring out of buses and cars, teachers standing in the doorways, parents who'd stopped to see what the commotion was about. Jake could see phones out, recording everything. Good. Let them record. Let the whole town see what happened when institutions failed children and communities had to step in. Jake raised his voice, speaking not just to Anderson, but to everyone watching. This is Marcus Thompson. He's 10 years old. For 8 months, he's been systematically assaulted by 3 older students at this school. He reported it to your counselor, Mrs. Henderson, 6 times. 6 times he asked for help, and 6 times he was told someone would look into it. Well, no one did. And 2 days ago, Marcus was beaten so badly he has cracked ribs and was afraid to come back to this school. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jake saw teachers exchanging uncomfortable glances, students whispering, parents looking angry. Marcus stood beside him, trembling slightly, but not hiding. Jake squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. So here's what's going to happen, Jake continued. These 32 men standing behind me are all veterans. We served our country. We fought for children just like Marcus to live in a world where they're safe and protected. And we've decided that Marcus Thompson is now under the protection of the Road Guardians. That means we're going to escort him to school every single day. We're going to walk him to his classes. We're going to make sure every person in this building knows that if Marcus is hurt even one more time, there will be consequences. You're threatening students? Anderson sputtered. We're not threatening anyone, James Rodriguez said sharply. He stepped forward, his teacher credentials giving him authority Anderson had to respect. I'm a high school teacher in the next district. What Jake is describing is a community escort program, perfectly legal, designed to ensure student safety when schools fail in their duty of care. We won't set foot inside your building without permission. We won't interact with other students. We'll simply be present, making it very clear that Marcus is not alone. And making it very clear that this school's negligence has been noticed, Bear added. The local news is about to get a very interesting story about how 32 veterans had to intervene because Pinewood Middle School couldn't protect one 10-year-old boy. Anderson looked panicked now, realizing the public relations nightmare unfolding before him. Now wait just a minute. We can resolve this. You should have resolved it months ago, Jake said coldly. But you didn't. So now we're resolving it. Marcus, come on, let's get you to class. Jake started walking toward the entrance, Marcus beside him, and all 32 road guardians fell in behind them. It was a slow, deliberate procession, a wall of men moving through the crowd of stunned students and teachers like an honor guard escorting royalty. Because that's exactly what they were doing, showing Marcus that he was valuable enough to merit protection, important enough to warrant this display, worthy enough for 32 strangers to disrupt their entire day. They walked through the main entrance into the hallways lined with lockers and classroom doors. Students pressed against the walls, staring with wide eyes at the leather-clad men filling their school. Jake could see the fear, the confusion, but also the dawning understanding. This was what it looked like when adults actually protected children. This was what it looked like when the community refused to tolerate abuse. Jake had gotten Marcus's schedule from the school website. His first class was English with Mrs. Caroline Foster in room 107. They walked there in formation, their boots echoing on the linoleum floors. When they reached the classroom, Jake turned to face the 31 men behind him. "Marcus is going to class now. We'll wait here. Take positions in the hallway. Make yourselves comfortable. But make sure everyone who walks by understands that this boy is protected." The men nodded and arranged themselves along the hallway, some leaning against lockers, others sitting on benches, all with their arms crossed and their expressions making it clear they weren't going anywhere. They looked like what they were, trained soldiers standing guard duty, except their mission was protecting one small boy instead of a military installation. Jake walked Marcus to the classroom door. Mrs. Foster, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, stood in the doorway looking bewildered. "Mrs. Foster, this is Marcus Thompson. He'll be in class today. He's had some difficulties recently, but those are going to be resolved now. If anyone, and I mean anyone, gives him trouble, you let me know immediately. I'll be right outside." Mrs. Foster looked at Marcus, at his fading bruises, and understanding flooded her face. "Of course. Marcus, come in. Take a seat wherever you'd like." Marcus looked up at Jake with an expression of pure trust. "You'll be here when class is over?" "I'll be right outside that door," Jake promised. "Every single class all day. You're safe now." Marcus walked into the classroom, and Jake saw something he hadn't seen before. The other students actually moving to make space for him, offering him seats, looking at him with something like respect instead of the contempt or indifference he'd grown used to, because Marcus Thompson wasn't invisible anymore. He was the kid with 32 bikers standing guard. He was the kid who mattered enough for this kind of protection. Jake took up position directly outside the classroom door. Within minutes, Principal Anderson appeared with 2 police officers, local cops Jake recognized from around town, Officer Michael Bennett and Officer Lisa Torres, both decent people who took their community protection duties seriously. "Jake Morrison," Bennett said with a sigh. "What are you doing?" "Protecting a child," Jake said simply. "Everything we're doing is legal, Mike. We're not trespassing. This is a public school during school hours. We're not threatening anyone. We're not disrupting classes. We're simply present, ensuring that Marcus Thompson makes it through his school day safely." "You're intimidating students," Principal Anderson protested. "This is disrupting the learning environment. What's disrupting is allowing children to be assaulted in your locker rooms," Officer Torres said sharply, giving Anderson a look that suggested she had opinions about his competence. "I've read the CPS report that was filed yesterday. This boy's been asking for help for months, and your school did nothing. If anything, Mr. Morrison here is doing your job for you." Anderson sputtered, but Bennett held up a hand. "Jake, I understand what you're doing, and between you and me, I respect it. But you need to understand that 32 armed men, we're not armed," Jake interrupted. "Check if you want. None of us are carrying weapons. We don't need weapons. Our presence is enough. And you'd be turning this school into a circus, then make it so we don't have to come back," Jake said, his voice hard. "Institute actual bullying prevention. Discipline the kids who put Marcus in the hospital. Make this school safe for him. Do your job and we'll step back, but until then, we're not going anywhere." Principal Anderson looked like he wanted to argue, but Officer Torres put a hand on his arm. "Richard, let's talk in your office, now." It wasn't a suggestion. As the adults walked away, Jake remained at his post outside Marcus's classroom. Through the door's window, he could see the boy sitting in the second row, actually participating in class, raising his hand to answer questions. The transformation was already visible. Shoulders back instead of hunched, eyes forward instead of down, engaging instead of hiding. The day proceeded with military precision. Between each class period, Jake and 2 other road guardians walked Marcus to his next classroom. The hallways parted before them like the Red Sea. Students whispered and stared, but no one, absolutely no one, approached Marcus with anything but cautious respect. The bullies, Brandon Hutchins and his crew, were nowhere to be seen. Jake later learned they'd been pulled from classes immediately and were in the principal's office with their parents. At lunch, Jake and Bear accompanied Marcus to the cafeteria. The large room fell silent when they entered, 32 bikers finding positions along the walls while Marcus got his tray of food. When he sat down at an empty table, his usual spot, Jake realized, always alone, something unexpected happened. A girl with curly red hair and freckles approached tentatively. She was about Marcus's age, carrying her own lunch tray, and she stopped a few feet away from the table. Marcus, she said softly, can I sit with you? Marcus looked up, surprised. Me? Yeah, I'm Natalie Harper. We're in the same math class. I wanted to say I'm sorry for not saying anything before. When those guys were mean to you, I should have stood up for you, but I was scared. But you're really brave, and I think you're cool. Marcus's eyes filled with tears, but he smiled. You can sit down. I'd like that. Within minutes, 3 more students joined the table. Kids who'd witnessed Marcus's suffering in silence, who'd felt guilty about their inaction, and who now saw an opportunity to make amends. Jake watched from his position by the wall and felt his throat tighten. This was what it looked like when one act of courage inspired others. This was what it looked like when a community started to heal. By the end of the school day, the local news had arrived. A reporter named Vanessa Cole from KPTV Portland stood outside the school with her camera crew, interviewing parents, students, and eventually Jake himself. Mr. Morrison, some people are calling what you did today vigilante justice. How do you respond to that? Jake faced the camera directly. This isn't vigilante justice. This is community action in response to institutional failure. Marcus Thompson asked for help 6 times. He was ignored. He was beaten so badly 2 days ago that he has cracked ribs. The school failed him. The system failed him, so his community stepped in. These 32 men behind me are all veterans. We took an oath to protect those who can't protect themselves. That oath doesn't expire just because we're not in uniform anymore. What do you hope to accomplish? I hope every school administrator in Oregon, in America, sees this story and asks themselves, are we doing enough? Are there kids suffering in our schools that we're ignoring? I hope every child who's being bullied sees that they're not alone, that there are people who will fight for them. And I hope every bully understands that their actions have consequences. We're not going to hurt anyone, but we're going to make damn sure Marcus is safe. And if that makes us uncomfortable for people, good. Sometimes discomfort is what it takes to create change. The interview went viral within hours. By evening, Jake's phone was ringing off the hook. Reporters, other veteran groups, parents of bullied children from around the country, and child advocacy organizations wanting to replicate the Road Guardians model. But the call that mattered most came at 8 p.m. It was Jennifer Valdez, the social worker. Jake, I did the home visit today with Derek Thompson. I'm filing for emergency removal of Marcus from the home. The conditions were appalling. No food in the house, filthy conditions, evidence of alcohol abuse everywhere, and Derek admitted he couldn't handle being a father anymore. He actually seemed relieved when I mentioned foster care. Jake's heart pounded. What happens now? Marcus needs placement tonight. I have a foster family lined up, but... She paused. Jake, I've seen your background check from when you registered as a volunteer advocate. You're clean, you're stable. You have the means to provide for a child. And Marcus trusts you. Have you ever considered becoming a foster parent? The question hit Jake like a freight train. He thought about Connor, about the empty bedroom in his apartment he couldn't bring himself to change, about the hole in his heart that had been bleeding for 5 years, about Marcus asking, "Can you be my dad?" "Yes," Jake said, his voice breaking. "Yes, I've considered it. I want to do it. Whatever paperwork I need to fill out, whatever classes I need to take, I'll do it." Please, don't send him to strangers. Let me be his family. The emergency placement process can be fast-tracked, given the circumstances and your background. I'll need you to come to my office first thing tomorrow morning. Bring Marcus with you from school. We'll start the paperwork. Jake, are you sure? This is a huge commitment. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Jake said. 3 months later, December brought snow to Pinewood, transforming the small Oregon town into a winter wonderland. Christmas lights twinkled on Main Street, and the town square featured a massive tree, surrounded by ice skaters and families drinking hot chocolate. Marcus Thompson, soon to be Marcus Morrison, if the adoption paperwork went through as planned, sat at the kitchen table in Jake's apartment doing homework. He'd gained 12 pounds since October, the gauntness gone from his face, replaced by healthy color and the beginning of actual childhood roundness. His hair was trimmed neatly. He wore clothes that fit, and most importantly, he smiled. Often. The past 3 months had been transformative for both of them. After that first dramatic day at school, Principal Anderson had implemented sweeping changes to Pinewood Middle School's bullying policies. Brandon Hutchins, Tyler Morrison, and Chad Reynolds had been expelled and were now attending an alternative school with mandatory counseling. Mrs. Henderson, the counselor who'd ignored Marcus's pleas, had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. New reporting protocols were established, anonymous tip lines were created, and every staff member underwent training on recognizing and responding to abuse. But more than policy changes, the culture had shifted. Students who'd once ignored Marcus now included him. Teachers who'd overlooked his suffering now checked in with him regularly, and the road guardians, while no longer providing daily escorts, maintained a presence, visiting the school monthly, attending school board meetings, and making it clear they were watching. Marcus's therapy sessions with Dr. Helen Cartwright, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma, had been difficult but healing. Twice a week, Marcus sat in her comfortable office with its warm lighting and soft chairs and slowly unpacked the weight he'd been carrying. The guilt about his mother's death, the fear that had defined his existence, the belief that he was fundamentally unlovable. Marcus, I want you to understand something, Dr. Cartwright had told him in one of their early sessions. The accident that killed your mother was exactly that, an accident. The weather was bad, the roads were slick. A tragic combination of circumstances, but it wasn't your fault. You were a child who wanted his mother at a school event. That's normal. That's healthy. What happened after was the universe being cruel, not you doing anything wrong. It had taken weeks for Marcus to truly believe those words, but with Jake's constant reassurance and Dr. Cartwright's patient guidance, the belief that he'd killed his mother slowly began to crumble. In its place grew something healthier, the understanding that tragedy happens, that grief is complicated, and that his father's inability to cope was Derek's failure, not Marcus's burden to carry. Derek Thompson had signed away his parental rights in November without contest. Jennifer Valdez had told Jake that Derek had looked almost grateful during the proceeding, a man so broken by his own demons that he couldn't even fight for his son. Marcus had chosen not to attend the hearing. He stopped being my dad a long time ago, Marcus had said quietly. Jake's my dad now, even if the paper doesn't say it yet. Now, as Jake cooked dinner in their small kitchen, spaghetti and meatballs, Marcus's favorite, he watched the boy work through his math problems with a contentment he hadn't felt since Connor was alive. The apartment had changed over these months. Connor's bedroom was still there, but Jake had opened the door, dusted the shelves, and begun the slow process of honoring his son's memory without being imprisoned by it. He'd shown Marcus the room and given him a choice. This was my son, Connor's room, Jake had said. He died 5 years ago. I've kept it exactly the way it was, but I think maybe that's not healthy. If you want this to be your room, we can make it yours. We'll keep some of Connor's things, the ones that matter most to me, but we'll make it a space for you. A space where you can be safe and happy. I think Connor would like that. He was a good kid. He would have wanted another kid to be happy here. Marcus had looked at the room, the baseball trophies, the posters of superheroes, the model airplanes hanging from the ceiling, and then at Jake. Can we keep the airplanes? They're really cool. And maybe one picture of Connor? So I can know what he looked like? So I can know the brother I never got to meet? Jake had cried then, pulling Marcus into a tight hug. Yeah, buddy, we can do that. The room was now a blend, some of Connor's treasures preserved with love, mixed with Marcus's growing collection of books, art supplies, and the new skateboard Jake had bought him. On the dresser sat a framed photograph, Connor grinning with missing teeth, and next to it, a new photo of Jake and Marcus taken at Thanksgiving, both of them laughing at something Bear had said during the Road Guardian's annual feast. Dad? Marcus said now, looking up from his homework. The word still made Jake's heart skip every time. I'm stuck on this word problem. Jake came over, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Let's see, if a train leaves Chicago at 60 miles per hour. Okay, these are tricky. Let's work through it together. They bent over the worksheet together, Jake guiding Marcus through the problem with patience, praising each correct step, gently correcting mistakes without criticism. This was parenting. The mundane, beautiful, everyday moments of helping with homework and making dinner and just being present. Jake had forgotten how much he'd missed it. The buzzer rang. Jake pressed the intercom. Yeah? It's Jennifer Valdez. Can I come up? Jake's stomach clenched. Social worker visits still made him nervous, even though every check-in had gone perfectly. He buzzed her in and opened the apartment door, watching as she climbed the stairs with her ever-present leather portfolio. Jennifer smiled when she reached the landing, but there was something in her expression that made Jake's chest tight. Hi, Jake. Marcus. Sorry to drop by unannounced. Can we talk? Of course. Come in. I was just making dinner. You want to stay? I appreciate the offer, but I can't. This is a professional visit. She sat on the couch, and Jake and Marcus joined her, Marcus instinctively moving closer to Jake. Jennifer looked at both of them, and then her professional mask cracked into a genuine smile. I have news. The judge reviewed your adoption petition. Given the circumstances, Derek's rights termination, Marcus's clear preference, your exemplary record as a foster parent these past 3 months, the home study results, Dr. Cartwright's recommendation, he's expediting the process. The final adoption hearing is scheduled for December 23rd. If everything goes as expected, Marcus will legally be your son before Christmas. The words hung in the air for a moment. Then Marcus turned to Jake with eyes wide with hope and disbelief. Really? For real? For real, Jennifer confirmed. Jake, you'll be Marcus's legal father. Marcus, you'll officially be Marcus Morrison. That is, if you want to change your name. You don't have to. I want to, Marcus said immediately. I want to be Marcus Morrison. I want Jake to be my dad. I want this to be my family. Jake pulled Marcus into his arms, both of them crying now, years of grief and months of hope culminating in this moment. Jake had lost Connor. Nothing would ever change that. But Marcus had lost his mother, lost his childhood to abuse and neglect. And somehow they'd found each other. Two broken people who might just be able to make each other whole. There's one more thing, Jennifer said softly. The school wants to do something special. Apparently, Natalie Harper, Marcus's friend, started a project. She and a group of students have been working on it for weeks. They want to present it to Marcus before winter break. Principal Anderson called me yesterday. He said the whole school has transformed because of what happened in October. He wanted you both to know. Well, he wanted to say thank you for forcing them to be better. The presentation happened on December 22nd, the last day of school before winter break. Marcus walked into the gymnasium expecting a regular assembly and instead found the entire student body and faculty gathered around a massive banner that read, "Marcus, our inspiration." Natalie Harper, who'd become Marcus's best friend, stood at a microphone with a poster board covered in signatures and messages. She was nervous, her hands shaking, but her voice was clear. Marcus Morrison, came to our school and showed us what courage looks like. He asked for help when he needed it. He survived things that would have broken most people. And when someone finally listened and helped him, he didn't get revenge. He didn't become mean like the people who hurt him. He just kept being kind. He kept being himself. And that made all of us want to be better. She held up the poster board. Every single student and teacher in this school signed this. We all wrote messages about what you taught us, about standing up for people, about speaking up when we see someone hurting, about being brave enough to ask for help. You changed Pinewood Middle School, Marcus. You changed all of us. Thank you. The gymnasium erupted in applause. Marcus stood there overwhelmed, tears streaming down his face as students he barely knew clapped and cheered. Jake stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder, and felt his own tears fall. This was what healing looked like. This was what happened when one child's suffering became a catalyst for community transformation. Principal Anderson approached them after the assembly. He looked older than he had in October, more humble. "Mr. Morrison, Marcus, I owe you both an apology. This school failed Marcus catastrophically. We were complacent. We prioritized order over safety, policies over people. What happened in October was a wake-up call we desperately needed. I want you to know we're different now, better, because you forced us to be." Jake shook his hand. "Thank you for saying that, and thank you for actually changing. That's the part that matters." That evening, the Road Guardians gathered at the clubhouse for their monthly meeting. But this time, it was also a celebration. Marcus's adoption hearing was the next day, and the Brotherhood wanted to mark the occasion. Bear stood at the front of the room, raising a bottle of root beer. The club had a strict no-alcohol policy when kids were present. "Brothers, we started this club to protect children who couldn't protect themselves. Over the years, we've helped dozens of kids. But Marcus here, he's special. He reminded us why we do this. He reminded the whole town what's at stake when we fail our children. And he gave our brother Jake a second chance at fatherhood. So let's raise a glass. To Marcus Thompson Morrison, may his story inspire other kids to be brave. May his healing be complete, and may he always know he's got 32 uncles who'd ride through hell for him. To Marcus! 32 voices shouted in unison. Marcus, standing beside Jake with a root beer of his own, grinned wider than Jake had ever seen. "Thank you," he said, his voice small but steady. "All of you. You saved my life. You gave me a family. You showed me that grown-ups can be good, that people care. That I matter. I'm never going to forget that." David Chen approached with a wrapped package. "We got you something, kid. Early Christmas present." Marcus unwrapped it carefully and found a leather vest, child-sized with patches sewn on it. "Road Guardians Honorary Member," read the back patch. On the front was a smaller patch that said, "Protected by 32. "You're one of us now," David said. "You'll get your road name when you're older. But for now, you're family. And family looks out for each other." 6 months later, June sunshine warmed Pinewood as the school year ended and summer began. Marcus Morrison, the adoption had been finalized on December 23rd, the best Christmas present either he or Jake had ever received, was finishing 6th grade with straight B's, a handful of close friends, and a confidence that would have been unimaginable a year ago. The final day of school brought the usual chaos of yearbook signings, locker cleanouts, and promises to stay in touch over the summer. Marcus stood at his locker, now covered with photos of friends and inside jokes, carefully packing his belongings. Natalie Harper appeared beside him, her own locker 3 down from his. "Can't believe we're going to be 7th graders next year," she said, signing his yearbook with an elaborate message about friendship and bravery. "You ready for summer?" "So ready," Marcus said, grinning. "Dad and I are taking a motorcycle trip, going to visit some national parks. He's teaching me to camp." "That's so cool. My family's just going to the beach like always. Boring." But she smiled as she said it, comfortable in the normalcy of her complaint. As they talked, Marcus noticed a small boy sitting alone on the bench outside the main office. He was younger, maybe a 4th grader, with dark hair falling over his eyes and a posture Marcus recognized instantly, shoulders hunched, head down, trying to be invisible. The boy had a fresh bruise on his cheek and was clutching his backpack like a shield. Marcus's stomach clenched with recognition. That had been him. That was exactly how he'd looked last year. Broken, scared, alone. "I'll catch up with you later," Marcus told Natalie, already moving toward the boy. He sat down on the bench, maintaining some distance so as not to crowd him. "Hey, I'm Marcus. What's your name?" The boy glanced up briefly, then back down. Christopher Webb." "You okay, Christopher?" "I'm fine." But Marcus knew that particular lie intimately. "You don't look fine. You look like something's hurting. And I don't just mean that bruise on your face." Christopher's eyes filled with tears he was clearly trying to hold back. "It doesn't matter. Nobody cares anyway." "I care," Marcus said softly. "I know what it's like to feel like you're alone, like nobody sees you, like asking for help doesn't work because nobody listens. I know exactly what that feels like." Christopher looked at him now, really looked at him. "You do?" "Yeah. Last year I was where you are. I was being hurt at school and at home, and I was so scared and alone I wanted to disappear. But someone helped me. Someone saw me when everyone else looked away, and everything changed." "Do you want help, Christopher?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. "My dad, he gets angry sometimes, and there are these kids in my grade who push me around. But when I tell teachers, they just say boys will be boys, or I need to toughen up, or they say they'll look into it, but nothing changes," Marcus finished. "Yeah, I know, but here's what's going to happen now. You're not alone anymore. I'm going to help you. And I know people who are really, really good at making sure kids are safe. Do you trust me?" Christopher wiped his eyes. "I don't know you." "That's fair. But I'm asking you to take a chance, because I promise you this doesn't have to be your life. You can be safe. You can be happy. You can have people who protect you. Will you let me try?" Christopher thought for a long moment, then nodded. Marcus pulled out his phone. Jake had gotten him one for emergencies, and called the number he knew by heart. Jake answered on the second ring. "Hey, buddy, school done?" "Dad, I need you to come to the school. And can you call Jennifer Valdez and maybe get some of the guys? I think I found another kid who needs us." There was a pause, and Marcus could hear the emotion in Jake's voice when he responded. "I'm on my way. I'm so proud of you, Marcus. I'll be there in 10 minutes." Jake arrived with Bear and David, the 3 men walking into the school with purpose but not aggression. Marcus led them to Christopher, who shrank back slightly at the sight of the intimidating men in leather vests. "It's okay," Marcus assured him. "This is my dad, Jake, and these are my friends. They're the ones who helped me, and they're going to help you too." Jake knelt down to Christopher's level, his experienced eyes taking in the bruises, the fear, the desperate hope. "Hey, Christopher, I'm Jake Morrison. This is my son, Marcus. He tells me you might need some help. Is that right?" Christopher nodded, tears flowing freely now. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to call a social worker. She's really nice. Her name's Jennifer. We're going to document those bruises and find out what's happening at home and at school. And then we're going to make sure you're safe every single day, however long it takes. Sound good?" "Really?" Christopher whispered. You'd really help me. You don't even know me. I don't need to know you deserve to be safe, Jake said firmly. Every child deserves that. And sometimes when the system isn't working fast enough, communities have to step in. That's what we do. We protect kids. It's our job, our mission. And starting right now, you're under our protection. Marcus sat beside Christopher as Jake made calls, and Bear went to find Principal Anderson, who, to his credit, had become a genuine ally in child protection efforts. David stayed with the boys, his presence comforting rather than frightening, once Christopher realized these scary-looking men were actually heroes. It gets better, Marcus told Christopher quietly. I promise you. I know you can't believe that right now. I couldn't either when I was where you are, but it's true. You're going to have people who care about you. You're going to feel safe. You're going to get to just be a kid again. And maybe someday, when you're doing better, you'll find another kid who needs help, and you'll be able to do for them what people did for you. Did that happen to you? Christopher asked. Is that what you're doing now? Yeah, Marcus said, and he felt something click into place inside him. A sense of purpose, of the pain he'd endured having meaning beyond just surviving it. My dad and his friends saved me. And now I get to help save you. And maybe you'll save someone else someday. That's how it works. We take care of each other. We make sure no kid is alone. By the end of the day, Jennifer Valdez had interviewed Christopher, documented his situation, and begun the process of ensuring his safety. The Road Guardians had committed to providing escort services for Christopher, just as they had for Marcus. And Principal Anderson had personally apologized to Christopher for the school's previous inadequate response to the bullying he'd reported. That evening, as Jake and Marcus drove home through Pinewood's familiar streets, Marcus stared out the window thoughtfully. Dad? Yeah, buddy. When I grow up, I want to do what you do. I want to help kids who are hurting. Maybe be a social worker. Or start my own group like the Road Guardians. I want to make sure no kid ever feels as alone as I felt. Jake reached over and squeezed Marcus's shoulder, his heart full to bursting. You know what, Marcus? You're already doing it. What you did today, seeing Christopher and choosing to help him instead of just being glad it wasn't you anymore, that took courage. That took empathy. That took exactly the kind of heart that changes the world. You really think so? I know so. Connor would have been so proud to call you his brother, and I am so incredibly proud to call you my son. They pulled into the parking lot behind the hardware store and climbed the stairs to their apartment. No longer Jake's apartment, but their home. Marcus had lived there for 8 months now, but some mornings Jake still woke up amazed that this was real, that he had a son again, that Marcus had saved him just as surely as he'd saved Marcus. Inside, Marcus went to do his homework while Jake started dinner. But first, Jake walked to the living room and looked at the photographs on the wall. Connor's picture was still there, that gap-toothed grin preserved forever. Beside it now hung a formal adoption photo. Jake in his best shirt, Marcus in a new outfit, both of them beaming at the courthouse on December 23rd. And next to that, a candid shot from last month, Jake, Marcus, and all 32 Road Guardians at a fundraiser barbecue, everyone laughing at something ridiculous Tiny had done. 3 photographs, 3 chapters of Jake's life. The son he'd lost, the son he'd found. The family they'd built together. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Bear. Heard what Marcus did today? Kid's got his father's heart. Good job, brother. Jake smiled and typed back. He's got his own heart. Just needed people to help him remember it was there. Over the next few weeks, Christopher Webb's situation improved dramatically, much like Marcus's had. His father entered court-mandated alcohol treatment. Christopher began therapy. The school implemented additional oversight. And the Road Guardians added another child to their protected list. Another kid who learned that he mattered, that he was valued, that he deserved safety and love. But more than that, something had shifted in Pinewood itself. The town that had once looked away from hurting children now looked closer. Parents paid more attention, teachers asked more questions, students stood up for each other. The local newspaper ran a series on child abuse prevention. The town council funded additional social workers and school counselors. Change rippled outward, touching lives in ways big and small. And it had all started with one 10-year-old boy asking one question: "Can you be my dad?" By the end of summer, Marcus and Jake had taken that promised motorcycle trip, 2 weeks exploring Crater Lake, the Redwoods, and the Oregon coast. Marcus, now almost 11 and filling out with good food and love, wore his honorary Road Guardian's vest with pride. He'd learned to set up a tent, cook over a campfire, and tell the difference between bird calls. But more importantly, he'd learned to laugh freely, to trust, to believe in his own worth. On their last night of the trip, they sat by a campfire at a state park overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The sun was setting in brilliant oranges and purples, and the sound of waves provided a peaceful soundtrack. "Dad," Marcus said, poking the fire with a stick, "can I ask you something?" "Always." Do you still miss Connor? Is it okay that I'm here instead of him?" Jake was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I will always miss Connor. He was my first son, and losing him nearly destroyed me. But Marcus, you're not instead of him. You're in addition to him. My heart didn't replace the love I had for Connor with love for you. It expanded. It grew bigger to hold both of you. Connor will always be my son, and so will you. Both of those things are true, and neither one diminishes the other. I wish I could have met him. I wish you could have too. You guys would have gotten along great. He was brave and kind, just like you. He would have been proud to be your big brother. And I think he'd be happy that I found you, that I'm okay again, that we're a family." Marcus leaned against Jake's shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink into the ocean. Two people who'd been broken by tragedy and trauma, who'd found each other against impossible odds, who'd learned that family wasn't just about blood. It was about choosing each other every single day and building something beautiful from the wreckage of what had been lost. "Dad?" Marcus said again, his voice sleepy. "Yeah, buddy? Thank you for saying yes. When I asked if you could be my dad, thank you for saying yes." Jake kissed the top of Marcus's head, his throat too tight for words. But finally he managed, "Thank you for asking. You saved my life, Marcus, just as much as I saved yours. We saved each other." The stars came out above them, countless points of light in the darkness. And Jake Morrison, veteran, father, protector of the vulnerable, felt more at peace than he had in 5 years. The pain of losing Connor would never completely disappear, but it had transformed into something purposeful, the determination to make sure no child suffered alone if he could prevent it. And Marcus Morrison, survivor, son, friend, helper of others in need, fell asleep by the fire, safe and loved, and finally, blessedly home. The Road Guardians continued their work, case after case, child after child, but the story of Marcus Thompson became legendary in their community. The boy whose courage to ask for help had changed an entire town. Schools across Oregon implemented new anti-bullying programs inspired by what happened at Pinewood Middle School. Other veteran motorcycle groups formed child protection chapters, and Jennifer Valdez used the case in her training seminars as an example of what's possible when communities refuse to accept the unacceptable. 5 years later, when Marcus was 16 years old, he stood before the Road Guardians at their monthly meeting and asked for full membership. He'd been riding with Jake since he was 13, had his motorcycle license, and more importantly, had dedicated hundreds of hours to helping other kids in crisis. He'd mentored Christopher Webb through middle school. He'd helped start an anti-bullying program at the high school. He'd volunteered with Jennifer Valdez's office, serving as a peer advocate for kids entering foster care. Bear, now 73 but still riding, stood before the club with tears in his eyes. "Brothers, we started the Road Guardians to protect innocent children, but Marcus Morrison has taught us something even more important. Survivors can become protectors, victims can become heroes, and one act of courage can inspire an entire generation. I move that we accept Marcus Morrison as a full member of the Road Guardians." All in favor? 32 hands went up. 32 voices said, "Aye." And Marcus Morrison, who'd once been a broken 10-year-old hiding behind a dumpster, became the youngest full member in Road Guardians history. Jake pinned the official patch onto Marcus's leather vest. No longer the honorary one from childhood, but the real thing. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "Every single day I'm proud of you." "I learned from the best," Marcus said, hugging his father tightly. "You showed me what it means to protect people, to stand up when everyone else sits down, to be brave when it's easier to look away. Everything I am, everything good about me, you helped build that." That night, the Road Guardians rode through Pinewood in formation, and at the center of the pack was Marcus Morrison, survivor, son, brother, protector. The rumble of 33 motorcycles echoed through the town, and people came out onto their porches to watch, to wave, to remember the day this all began. And somewhere in whatever comes after, Jake liked to believe that Connor was watching too, proud of the brother he'd never met, proud of the father who'd found purpose in pain, proud of the family that had been born from asking one simple, desperate question: "Can you be my dad?" The answer, it turned out, was always going to be yes. Did this story touch your heart in any way? Did Marcus's journey from a frightened, abused child to a confident young man who helps others resonate with you? Did Jake's transformation from a grieving father to a protector of the vulnerable inspire you? If this story moved you, if it made you think about the children in your own community who might be suffering in silence, if it reminded you that courage can spark change, if it showed you that broken people can heal each other, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Your words matter. Your engagement helps stories like this reach others who need to hear them. Hit the like button if you believe every child deserves to be protected and loved. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that they're not alone. And subscribe to this channel for more stories that celebrate the resilience of the human spirit, the power of community, and the extraordinary things that happen when ordinary people choose to be heroes.